A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime Daily, the podcast covering high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country every week. I'm your host, Ana Garcia. Our cases this week are all about parents who have been killed by their children, according to police. A mother and an adored school teacher is killed, say police, by her adult son. Her husband, the father of the accused killer, says that their son suffers from mental illness. The young man has been arrested, the husband has lost his wife, and it appears at the hands of his own son. What would justice look like in this case? But first, a furious daughter. She was upset because her father had cut her out of the will, and she was equally mad because he was selling the family beach house and wouldn't let his daughter, a real estate agent, get the listing and the big commission on that $1 million property. She's been convicted of murder, though insists that it wasn't her. But how then do you explain away one huge piece of evidence? She drove her RV to and from the murder scene. It's not like you can hide that thing. All right, we're recording this on Wednesday, May 15th of 2024. Our guest today is Alison Triessl, a criminal defense attorney, a legal expert who also provides analysis on Access Hollywood and KTLA, the TV station here in Los Angeles. Alison, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me. I always love spending some time with you and talking crime. My favorite.
Me too. You are absolutely a fan favorite without question. Everyone gets really excited on YouTube when they're like, oh, Alison is back.
Great.
So Alison, we've got two cases here where there is a theme. It's right. Children killing parents.
Right.
For two radically different reasons, if there can be a reason and motivation. Right. I think in one it's pretty clear, and the other one is just very, very sad.
Yeah, I mean, let me tell you, we have two cases, right, where children kill their parents, and I feel very strongly about, I feel differently about each one. One, I would represent the person in a heartbeat. The other, I'd say, oh my goodness, we have big problems. This is not a winnable case. How could you so cold-heartedly, without any remorse, kill your father and another elderly woman? Unbelievable.
It really is. Our first case is out of the Jersey Shore. It is from Surf City, which is on Long Beach Island. Now, Surf City is a really small community. Nothing ever happens there. I used to be a reporter, a South Jersey reporter. I can assure you this is an idyllic little area with beautiful white sand beaches. The kind of place where some people now live year round. There have always been people who live year round, but really it's kind of like a summer beach community. And the houses there are very, very expensive. It's exquisite, a little slice of heaven, as I like to say. So this beach house that belonged to the family is really at the center of this case because the house was up for sale and was in contract at the time of the murder. And the father had decided that, well, he wasn't going to let his daughter represent him in this sale, and she was a real estate agent, so she was mad about that, and she was mad about being cut out of the will. So, understandably, 57-year-old Sherry Lee Hefner has been convicted and given 2 life sentences for murdering her 87-year-old father, John Jack Enders, and his 75-year-old live-in girlfriend, Francois Frenchy Pitoy, I guess is how you would pronounce the last name. So Jack, had a pretty horrible relationship with this daughter and his other daughter. They were estranged. So, Alison, when there's that kind of family turmoil going on here.
Yeah. So, when you look at a case, right, and although motive never has to be proven in a criminal case, when you look at a case, you look at a couple things. You look at motive, you look at means, and you look at opportunity. Okay, that's sort of when you're putting together a case. Could this person have done it? What is the motive? What is the means by which they did it? Was there an opportunity? Focusing right now on motive, this is a very, very strong motive. In so many cases, where's the money? Where's the money going? Does someone feel that they should get that money that they're not going to get? And that is a very strong motive. We understand that she and her sister, that their father's will had been updated, and she and her sister were out, that he had a trust of some kind. This home had been taken out of the trust, that the home was going to sell for like $1.9 million. That is a lot of money. That is a lot of money. That she was angry that she was not going to be the real estate representative in the sale of the home, that the will had been changed to boot her out of the inheritance. And according to her own son, Ana, there was a strained relationship between his mother, so Sherry, and the girlfriend of the father, because she considered her, quote, a gold digger who was pressuring the father, Mr. Enders, to sell the beach house.
Yeah, she did not like Frenchie.
Nope,
Sherry did not like, we can't really call her the stepmom. They were in a relationship and living together, but she just thought that Frenchie was
for her, right? I mean, the argument is, well, this woman comes into the picture and all of a sudden I'm out of the will. She's pressuring him to sell the house. And if something happens to him, she's going to get to the house over my dead body, or in this case, over her dead body, over both of their dead bodies.
Over both of their dead bodies. It's unbelievable. The fact that this house was worth so much, and again, that area of New Jersey is very expensive, very exclusive. I'm just going to give everyone a little bit of a time frame so you can see how this evolved. So the house was moved out of the trust in May of 2021. And of course, Sherry was not happy about this. So several months later, in September 29, she then decides she's hell-bent on doing something about this. So she drives from Pennsylvania, where she lives, down to the Jersey Shore in her RV, a Winnebago. Allison, first of all, I mean, we're going to get to the violence of this act, but I need to point out...
That's not an inconspicuous car.
That's just it. The stupidity of driving a giant vehicle.
Yes.
And this area is not heavily populated. And at the end of September, I can assure you, it was not that busy. So an RV is pretty easy to spot. And it was spotted on the bridge cameras, because it's not like it's easy to get on and off LBI. And so it's spotted on bridge cameras. This RV is also spotted by neighborhood ring cameras. And it's big. You can't camouflage this thing.
One of the things that has really changed in the way officers investigate crimes, obviously the huge advancements in DNA, but more importantly, in my mind, is the availability and accessibility of cameras.
Yes.
I worked on a case, and there was a statistic that the average person can be seen on a video camera like over 200 times a day. And so the idea that somehow you can drive at 4:48 in the morning in a fairly desolate area in an RV, and you cross over a bridge, and there are cameras literally lining the way and providing the police with a map of where you're going, then how long you're there, and when you leave. Those kinds of things are really, really strong evidence that weren't present before, but it should send a reminder to criminals that if you're really thinking about committing a crime and getting away with it, It's virtually impossible because there is going to be a camera somewhere along that route, if not multiple cameras.
Well, I don't think she was thinking clearly, and in this case, it's not about, was
Well, this is
she.
blind rage, though.
This is rage, exactly.
Yeah,
Blind rage.
and this is premeditated. I mean, this is not something like we're going to talk about the other case where I feel very differently about it. But I mean, this is a case where this was pre-planned. I mean, this was pre-planned. You do not get into a vehicle. Her own son, by the way, explained it to the police as a midnight dash. I mean, they said when he explained about the animosity between the father and the father's girlfriend and his mother and called it a midnight dash. People don't go places in the middle of the night without some explanation.
Yeah, and with this blind rage, when you think about, I think some people may have surmised at first, well, maybe she went there to talk to them and force them perhaps to change their minds. But that just does not seem the case. And here's the thing. By killing them, she's already been cut out of the will. So then you kill them, right? How do you benefit? How do you benefit? How do you get back in the will? You lose everything.
Well, I mean, is the argument then that it would revert back? Had that will been properly filed, had it been notarized, can you revert back to the original will that included her? I mean, those are some questions that people they somehow think, well, if they're gone, it may revert back to a will that I was involved in. I'm reminded of what my father would tell me when I was growing up and I'd like to stay out too late. And he said, nothing good happens after 2 a.m. Like when you're out at 4:48 in the morning, nothing good happens.
And nothing good did happen. The surveillance footage captured someone approaching Jack's home just before 6 a.m. Another camera then captures someone exiting over the backyard fence, hopping the fence at Jack's home at about 6:42. So less than an hour inside the house to commit these murders. And the figure in the video was wearing oversized clothes and carrying an orange bag. Now, Sherry's Winnebago, that massive thing, was caught again on bridge cameras, leaving Long Beach Island at 6:58. So, it would be several days, Allison, before the bodies were even found. They were discovered on October 3rd, and according to the affidavit, it was one of Frenchie's relatives who requested a welfare check. And when police got there, they could already see through the window.
Right. Just to go back a little bit on on her route back. So it's Route 72. At the entrance of the Garden State Parkway, there is a license plate reader.
Yes.
There's a license plate reader that has the RV registered to her. So.
Right. Exactly. And because witnesses, right, had seen on these home surveillance cameras, they had seen the RV, and then you get a really, really clear number on the RV, and then it goes ... all the way back to her. In fact, when police went to talk to her, finally, what was parked in the driveway?
The RV.
The RV.
By the way, her son, who again did her no favors, said, "Oh no, she's the only one that's been driving it for the last couple weeks."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is just unbelievable. So inside the house, they find, it's just horrific. So you can already see Jack from outside. So Jack is sitting in a chair, like, what I would call a big armchair. And Frenchie they've both been stabbed. There's blood everywhere. And she's on a staircase. They're both clearly dead and have been dead for days. So there were also bloody footprints, and there was also blood on the fence from where the murderer had hopped over the fence. Remember, we saw something on surveillance video. So
Right.
the medical examiner conducted autopsies the following day, concluding both deaths were clearly homicides, and Jack died of a combination of blunt force trauma and multiple stab wounds, which resulted in a severed right artery. And
That
then
would
they
be 51 stab wounds. 51.
Oh, that's the other. Yes, it's the number of stab wounds. Let's discuss that. Because
Yeah.
here's what's bizarre. Prosecutors said during her trial, they said, when she got there, they were both in bed, and that she had shot both of them in the mouth, not to kill them, but kind of to just slowly, in a torturous way, kill them. And that she had dragged her father down to the recliner and then proceeded to stab and slash him 51 times for the dad and 39 times for Frenchie. What do you make of this?
So their theory, and if in fact, because she's always denied that she killed them. Okay, so
Right.
we never actually got the story as to how it played out from her, and the only other two eyewitnesses are dead. But if and the jury definitely believed that she did it, right? Because she was convicted. But the prosecutor's theory, and when I read this, it was surprising. I had never heard it of a crime explained quite this way, is that she was somehow able to shoot them both in the mouth that were non-fatal, and then intentionally bring him downstairs to this chair where they are eye to eye so that he can watch as she stabs him. That she did this purposefully so that he would remain alive as she stabbed him 51 times. The jury convicted her. So we know that she is guilty of the crime. And it takes someone with a truly depraved heart to stab anyone 51 times. But to me, it is so much exponentially worse if, in fact, she wanted him to look at her, and his last images as he's dying is his own daughter stabbing him repeatedly. And one of the people that testified at the sentencing hearing told the court, the public, the world, his little girl grew up to be a monster. Can you imagine, Anna? This is your child. And the last image you see as you lay there dying is your child, who at some point he absolutely adored. That was the information that came in, that he adored this woman. That the last image you see alive is your own child stabbing you, and that was done on purpose so that he could watch as she stabbed him.
Well, here's the thing about the adoration here. So, okay, he obviously, you love your children, but he did cut her out of the will. He would not let her represent him in the sale of his house. Not that he's obligated as a father by any means, right? He has the free choice, but clearly something was wrong here in this relationship.
Right. I mean, obviously it had soured. I mean, obviously things had gone very, very wrong. But just the idea that this is your child, this is your child. I did, I found it really interesting. I watched some of the closing argument for the defense, and sometimes you have to dig really deep as a defense attorney to find anything that is helpful. Trying to argue, well, it could have been a different day and she wasn't around that day. Yes, she was there that day, but she wasn't around that day.
That's flimsy.
Or the glove that was found, it had blood, but it didn't have, certain DNA, but there was DNA found. So it was in my mind, as weak as a defense as you can lodge, but sometimes you have so very little. You have so very little.
Yeah, it's just so interesting to me. Like, this clearly had been festering for a long time, because I think when you get to that rage where you're driving down there and you're going to do something, and if I don't know whether it was her gun or their gun, but I always say to myself, you have multiple chances and opportunities to stop yourself, right? As you're driving down there, you have plenty of time. It's at least an hour and a half drive, maybe more.
Right.
Right. When you park, when you get in there, you have multiple opportunities where you can use your self-control button, right? Find it somewhere, even if you have to dig it up.
Right.
And she did not. She did not. And then we're going to get to her, well, what I'm going to call her performance at sentencing, because I'm going to want you to hear two daughters speaking at sentencing. One, the convicted killer, and one, the daughter, Frenchie's daughter. And I'm going to want the two of you, I want all of you to compare those two. And you tell me what you think. We're going to get to that in just a second. Let's finish with some of the evidence and what's happened, because then I think you'll get the totality and the impact of that moment at sentencing.
Right. And I'll tell you, it was an interesting defense strategy to me, because you do have dried blood in the Winnebago. You do have the shell casing, and then the ammunition that matches found at her home. Those kinds, that kind of physical evidence, is so hard to overcome.
The dried blood of the victims in the RV.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just, this was an overwhelmingly strong case for the prosecution.
So then on October 4th of 2021, remember, this is again a few days later, Sherry was arrested for the murder of her father and for his girlfriend. She was arrested in Landenberg, Pennsylvania. Now, she was eventually extradited to New Jersey because then she would be tried there. And, she was claiming that she had been framed, that she was framed, she didn't do this, she was innocent, and she insisted that all the way through the trial and through sentencing, and she becomes very emotional in her speech to the court. So in January of 2022, just to get back to the house for a second, the house ultimately did sell to another buyer, and it sold for a little less, 1.7, because there are a lot of people who will not buy a house if they know that people have been murdered there.
There was a double homicide in that house. I mean, I mean that the value of the home drops. Yeah, no
Absolutely.
question. Yeah.
Absolutely. There are just some people who can't handle that. So then in February of this year, a jury found Sherry guilty of 2 counts of murder and weapons charges. Now, sentencing was May 10th, just a few days ago. And speaking at her sentencing, again, Sherry remained adamant that she had not committed these murders. Now, for those of you listening, her hands are shackled. She's wearing a green and white striped prison suit. She is addressing the court now. And I want you to listen. You all listen to her in her own words. Let's play the clip.
I really wish I was the one that was killed, and I was the one that was dead. This is horrible. The pain. I don't know why they were so horrifically taken, but I would give my life today in a heartbeat if we would spare them. I'm just so sorry that we all lost people we love, and I don't know why. And if I could give my life right this second, I could come back.
So there she is, incredibly emotional, crying. I don't know whether any of you believe her, because it was noted by a reporter covering the case that after she calmed down, she had this weird, slight, snickery little grimace smile. There was something about it that didn't set right with the reporters who noticed it. Look, you can read into it. Now, I'm going to play a clip from Frenchie's daughter, Okay, so you have Sherry, who's lost her dad, but but the legal system says at her own hands. And now we're going to a victim who, without question, is completely innocent here. We have the daughter of Frenchie. This is Valerie Lewis Evans. Listen to her plea.
She was the rock to our family, a lady that lit up any room she walked in. She lived her life giving and taking care of others. To know her is to love her. And I was truly blessed by God to have her for my mom. One phrase I will keep with me for all times is that I am still her daughter. I am still her daughter, and the distance between heaven and earth will never change that.
So I say to you, Alison, and everyone else listening, you've listened to these two daughters. Who do you believe?
Well, I mean, look, not only has a jury found her guilty and not did every single piece of evidence and point connect her, literally driving from her home to his home, they end up dead. There's motive, there's means, there's opportunity, and she's still proclaiming her innocence. And any of those crocodile tears, I would take as just simply offensive. If I was the family, I'd say, even now after conviction, no remorse, you're not contrite. The only thing I can think of as a reason that she would is if you're going to argue on appeal that you're factually innocent, you then, of course, cannot admit your guilt at the time of sentencing. And at that point, because she'd been convicted of double homicide, she knew that she was going to get life in prison. And so that is the only sort of excuse that I have for her as to why she would continue to proclaim her innocence. But to go on the way she did, to say, oh, I would exchange their lives for mine, I'm the victim here. I mean, it's really something else to claim that you're an orphan when you killed their parents, right?
It really is. It really is. And these statements did not sway the judge who sentenced Sherry to 2 life sentences for the murders. Sherry will be required to serve 63 years, 9 months, and 3 days without the possibility of parole for these murders. She will die in prison.
Well, I mean, she's 57, so unless she has some secret serum that I don't know about, she will die in prison.
She will die in prison. And again, I ask, how did you make things better for your situation? You thought you were wronged, right? From her perspective, she was wronged. Her father pulled her out of the will, selling this house that they all loved. She can't even collect the commission if she had represented as the seller's real estate agent. How in the world did you fix your problems here by killing them? How are you better off?
So, Anna, you and I have known each other for over 20 years.
Yep.
We have done crime together for that long. And it is always the case, or it is almost always the case that the blind rage, the greed, always trump any thought, any rational thought. It is never, ever worth it. It is never going to work out in your way. When a spouse kills the other spouse, who are the police going to look at? Who are the police going to look at? If you think you're going to get the life insurance, there is a law that precludes the person that killed you from collecting the life insurance. And now, as opposed to 20 years ago when you and I first started talking about cases like this, the advancements of DNA and ring cameras on everybody's doors and cameras everywhere you go, cell phone towers, you are going to get caught. It may not be the day of, but you're going to get caught, and you have to say to yourself, is the punishment that I am going to face, which is sitting in a very, very small cell, never deciding when you're going to get up in the morning, never deciding when you're going to bed at night. You don't make never getting to eat your favorite meal again. Is it worth it? Is it worth it?
Murder is not the solution to your problems.
No.
I say it over and over again, and yet people seem to think that it can, and it did not. And in this case, she thought she had lost it all. No, now she has lost it all. Lost it all. Horrible, horrible, horrible case. Our next case is really in our backyard, Burbank, California. And here, a school teacher has been murdered in her home, and police say at the hands of her son. The victim is 57-year-old Karen Lombardo, and the accused is her 25-year-old son, Kyle Lombardo. She and her husband, Vince, had been married for 31 years. They shared 2 children. Kyle still lived at home, and his father said because he faced many mental health challenges, could not be on his own, was struggling. Apparently, he had a few diagnoses. The father only shared some. He said that his son had ADD and also had Asperger's syndrome. But it sounds like there was a lot more going on here, a lot more than that, because those 2 things alone, though incredibly challenging without question, it sounds like there was a problem specifically with violence and self-control, because the father said that the police had been called multiple times to the home for help. So when this happened, the father was out of town, and it's about the worst call you can get. It happened at 10 p.m. on May 7th, and the mother was dead, and there was nothing that could be done. So the question is, what happened here? What happened? Because, Alison, I feel so badly for the father and the surviving son. What do you do with this? You've lived for, 25 years with the struggles of your child, trying to care for your child.
Yeah.
You love your wife. You want to help your son. Your wife has been murdered, and police say at the hands of your son. Where and how do you begin with justice here?
Right. And first of all, let me say that I'm so honored to be on your show today talking about this, because mental health and representing people who have significant mental health issues has always sort of been my calling. It is, I think, one of the things that I'm most known for. As you know, I recently represented a woman who was accused of killing 2 of her children, who had postpartum delusions. And so to me, I look at this case under a very different microscope than I look at other cases. That is not, without question. There are missing pieces so far that need to be filled in, and I want to start by saying we're using the words allegedly because he has not been tried, he has not been convicted. It is on the prosecution to prove his guilt, and so these are allegations only, and he is presumed to be not guilty. So I want to start with that, but what I want our listeners to walk through with us is, if you know someone who has a mental illness, or if your child is suffering from mental illness, there are steps that should be taken along the way that are important to understand and to know. Not all of these cases are preventable. They're just not. But there are signs and there are resources. And one of the things that the father said is the resources are so scarce that there are not available hospital beds. You have to wait months and months to get an appointment to be seen by a therapist or a doctor. But in this case, according to the father, he's out of town. He gets a phone call from his son, who, according to the father, and he did not elaborate. And unfortunately, this is going to be this is going to be one of those cases where the prosecution's star witness in this case is going to be the father, based on what had led up to this incident. He lived in the house with both of them. The police had been called on prior occasions. The prosecutors are going to want to know what they were called for, what kind of violent tendencies that their son had. But equally important is, what did his son say to him happened that night? I found it very interesting and striking and important to say, there was a statement, and this is according to the police, that they respond on May 7th, 2024, for a call of an unconscious female. The mother is found dead. The father does not believe that his son killed her on purpose. He had been out of town, and this is where it's interesting. According to Dad, Kyle called saying that there was some kind of altercation and mother's head was hit. That doesn't explain enough to me. It doesn't say that she fell and hit her head. Mother's son was hit. So that unfortunately puts him sort of at the center of what happened here. And to prove sort of the corpus of the case, you're going to be using Dad's testimony unless the son gives a complete statement. So that to me is really, really sad.
It is. And we have a clip that we can play for you of the father, Vince, describing this in his own words, so you can see his demeanor, his tone. You can see he's been through hell and back. And this is what the father, Vince, told ABC 7 News. Here's a clip.
He's mentally challenged, and he didn't want to kill her. There was some type of altercation that her head was hit.
So as a defense attorney, we know who the person is, right? So there's no question of of identification. This is the person. And so you look at two things. You look at, well, was this self-defense? Were they battling? Was the mother the initial aggressor? And was he doing this to defend himself? I would probably pretty quickly rule that out as a defense, because it's an improbable scenario. And so then I ask, well, is he not guilty by reason of insanity? So the first things, and this is why I say that I'm so honored to be on your show today, is because this is sort of my wheelhouse. And the first thing you ask is he immediately competent to stand trial? Okay, so that's the first question. Do you question his competency right now? Does he understand the nature of the charges against him? Does he understand the nature of the proceedings? Does he understand who the players in the courtroom are? Does he know who a judge is, a prosecutor, a defense attorney? Is he cooperating at all in his defense? So the first question we will learn in the upcoming court date is his public defender, who have said he didn't intend to kill her, is he going to question, is he going to raise a doubt as to the mental competency of his client? He may not. If he does, the case will then be sent to mental health court and to essentially restore his sanity, not for purposes of the underlying criminal case, the murder case, but so that he can go to trial understanding that limited understanding of what the nature of the charges are, what he's being accused with, and to assist in the preparation of his defense.
Oh my gosh, this is so sad. Because the father said that Kyle had been given multiple prescriptions over the years for his mental health issues, multiple. And he said that really none of these prescriptions, these medicines, were effective. And then to
Right.
complicate matters, the father said that Kyle had had trouble receiving mental health services from the state, right? From the government, trying to get appointments. As we all know, even if you have health insurance and you're going the private route, it is still hard to get in. It is still hard to get in a timely manner. And then the father adds that the mental health services available to his son, he said, quote, "Until something happens, you can't do anything. There's not enough help to help these people, especially when they become adults."
That is true. That is true. You lose a lot of control once they are 18. I also have to say, and then I want to get back to sort of some of the legal issues, but I want to say that in my experience, another hindrance here is the way when they get the medication, it's the way it makes them feel.
Yes.
And they are lethargic. They feel, sort of numb and dull, and they stop taking their medication. I don't know if that's the case here, but that is often something that I hear from people where they say, I was sick all the time. I didn't feel well. And that's a very strong, and as a parent, you cannot force medication upon an adult child. You cannot do it. An adult child, after they're 18 and they're adults, there really is very little you can do. And how rarely do we see those cases like the Britney Spears, where there's a conservatorship that can force medication? Well, for people like you and I, Anna, and for people who don't have that kind of means to do that, that is absolutely unheard of, that you get a conservatorship. It can be done with forced medication, but that's part of it. So you have lack of availability for treatment, care, a patient's unwillingness, or that taking that medication makes them feel so bad that unfortunately they may go for years feeling this imbalance, not being well, not being medicated, and so you have all of those things that compound a already sort of volatile situation. I would want to know in this case, we don't know enough yet. Has he been under 5150 holds? Has he been treated at psychiatric hospitals? Does he have a therapist, a psychiatrist? And then if they're going to build an insanity defense, which I have a feeling, given what the dad has said thus far, the dad is wholly in support of, right? I mean, the surviving family member wants their son to get help. But even if they're all on board for that, the standard for legal insanity in the state of California, this is according to Penal Code Section 1026, is that legal insanity requires that the person, by reason of mental disease or defect, was incapable of either knowing the nature of his or her act, understanding the nature of his or her act, and distinguishing between right and wrong at the time of the commission. That is a very, very high burden. And in the United States, less than 1% of felony cases, when you're arguing reason, you're not guilty by reason of insanity, it's a very high burden to prove.
It should. And we see so many cases and cover them here where people just, it's a mockery, where they just, use that as an excuse so often. But there are true cases where the people are ill, unfit, did not know what they were doing. By the way,
I don't know if that's the case here. I mean, I don't know. We don't know enough. We don't have enough background information about his mental state. We don't know what previous doctors has said about him. We don't know his condition. I agree with you that, autism and ADD won't get you there. I mean, they just won't get you to a place where you were legally insane at the time in the state of California. You have to, where you cannot distinguish between right and wrong. They won't get you there. But I feel so strongly about this case because if all these things are true and if he was truly mentally ill at the time, I think that I think that should definitely be considered in the punishment that he should receive in this case. Should he spend the time in a state mental hospital as opposed to state prison? And by the way, even if you're found not guilty by reason of insanity, you're not released. You're sent to a mental hospital, and there are times where you actually will serve more time in that state mental hospital than you would have in the state prison.
It is obviously incredibly sad for the Lombardo family, without question.
Yes.
But this case is having such an effect on the community because of who she was. So she was a school teacher for more than 30 years in the Burbank School District, and most of the time she worked at Bret Harte Elementary School. That means hundreds of children in her time have gone on and become adults, multiple generations. And that is what's so hard because, Burbank has a lot of TV studios and productions and all of that. And so people come in during the day and then they leave. But then there's a real community that lives there. It's not huge. It's a little city. And they're
closely connected, right? They're
closely connected, deeply affected. And we see this in communities where these tragedies happen, that it is really an impact. And because she was a school teacher, it's now impacting her current kids. So she was a kindergarten teacher at the time of her murder, of her death. So those little ones are 5 years old. How do you explain to them what's happened? And how in the world do you explain to a 5-year-old that your teacher, Mrs. Lombardo, was killed, police say, by her son?
Well, it's interesting because, as you mentioned, I work for KTLA as a legal expert, and there has been extensive coverage of this case. And the two parts of the case that really struck me that have been covered was one of her former students, who's now an adult, saying, "I am so heartbroken. She was one of my favorite teachers. I will never forget her." And then a mother whose child is in Miss Lombardo's kindergarten class, and her remark was, "How do I explain to my child that she will never get to say goodbye to her teacher?" So those stories, and I'm sure there are hundreds and hundreds of them, this story, this tragedy has impacted an entire community. And even though Los Angeles is a really sprawling place, the individual cities like Burbank are very close-knit. And what a horrible tragedy.
Everyone knows each other. I mean, I do most of my everything, my living life in Burbank, because that's where work is. And the shoe repair person, the dry cleaner, the person at the, post office. Everyone knows each other in Burbank. And it's like every other town in America that we cover. And and so you can really understand how the murder of a school teacher is truly affecting the entire community. We've got some pictures that we can show you for those listening where former students and their families and people that she worked with have placed flowers and candles at the school as a remembrance to her. It's just incredibly, incredibly sad. So the autopsy results are still pending. However, on May 9th, Kyle was indeed arrested and charged with his mother's murder. He faces the potential of a life sentence if convicted. He's currently being detained on a $2 million bail. Bond has not been set. And he's scheduled to be arraigned on May 22nd. Now, KTLA spoke with Kyle's public defender, Jimmy Chu, who alleges that the death was accidental, but really didn't say anything more that would give us context for that. It's just so sad.
It is. It is. And this is why, a case like this, I do think there's failings in the system. I do think that there's failings in the system. And I do think that the system has to recognize that we need early intervention of mental illness. And when someone is calling and saying, my child, my spouse, my friend is really hurting, we need to get them the care that they need so that in the future, tragedies like this can be avoided. And I say tragedy, recognizing there's a death, and our system generally says that person needs to be accountable for what they did. Without question. I mean, that's what happens. But I also say that in cases like this, we have to be able to see what more can be done in our system to prevent it. Because in the last case, right? In the last case we covered, she had motive, she had opportunity, she had time to plan it. Were you going to stop her? Were you going to stop her from doing this? Was there treatment she could have gotten? She was greedy and wanted the money. She wanted the money.
Evil is one thing.
Right.
Evil is one thing.
But to me, when you have a father come out and say, my son did not want her to die, it's painful.
It is. It's so tragic. So tragic. It is time for our comments section. These are the crime cases you all are talking about on social media. And here is our producer, Will Updike. Hey, Will, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Anna?
Good.
Good to see you, Allison. Hey.
You.
All right. So this week we have a case of a grandfather really lowering the bar. This case comes out of Sacramento, California, where a grandfather allegedly paid a homeless woman $20 to watch his granddaughter while he got drunk in a bar. So how this all happened was deputies responded to this local bar after a call from the man who allegedly said his granddaughter had been kidnapped for human trafficking. Officers who arrived in the parking lot of this bar saw the caller. He appeared to be highly intoxicated, direct quote. According to police, the drunken grandfather, Jason Warren, proceeded to tell the authorities that he had paid an unknown homeless woman to watch his 7-year-old granddaughter so he could stop in this local watering hole, tie a couple on. And I guess he gave sort of the woman the instructions to take the little girl to a thrift store sort of nearby, I guess a little shopping trip. Unclear if he gave any additional money, though. Like if he just gave the woman the $20 to watch the daughter, and I don't know if, the little girl had an allowance or something. Maybe they were just going to window shop at the thrift store. I don't know. I don't know the budget there. But so despite like this kind of wild claim of the human trafficking and everything, the deputies take this really, really seriously. They were able to obtain security footage. It shows the girl leaving with a woman. And the search starts immediately. Everybody's in high gear in this. They really react quickly. And within about 30 minutes, a police helicopter is able to spot this woman and the missing child. They're using the megaphone saying return the girl to the parking lot. The woman complies with this. So when she returns the girl, she's telling authorities that she didn't think that this grandfather could care for the child. Because he was, I guess, even at the time, so visibly intoxicated, according to the woman. And so she says that she took the little girl back to the encampment and got her some food. And so paramedics check out the little girl, make sure everything's okay. They say that she didn't suffer any medical distress and she wasn't harmed. And she actually ended up corroborating this woman's story as well, a 7-year-old. And now, according to police, this little girl's aunt actually has full custody of the child, but she asked Granddad here to watch over the kid because she had to go to work. So our suspect, the grandfather in this whole thing, Jason Warren, was eventually charged with felony child endangerment and other charges. He has bonded out. And according to some local reports here, he doesn't seem that remorseful about the whole situation. He told KTXL, speaking of the homeless woman, I could tell by her character, she seemed like a decent person. I trusted her like I would trust my sister or cousin, which, I want to see the good in everybody. I don't know that I'm necessarily taking it that far, but he also kind of didn't respect, he apparently didn't take any responsibility for this. He didn't think that he did anything wrong. He also told the media outlet, everything I did, I told God about, and I said, it is your will, God, not my will. Let your will be done, which I feel like these are kind of conflicting things where it's like, okay, so did you think that this was like a good person and you trusted them like they were a family member, or you were just kind of saying whatever happens and it's not on me?
Oh, this is horrible. And I feel obviously paramount, very upset and worried for the little girl.
Yes.
But, I feel badly for this homeless woman because I do. I hope that she's not implicated in this.
I don't.
Not only is she not implicated,
That's what
the
I mean.
sheriff's office commended her. They called her a guardian angel because I'm
thinking about two things. Number one, obviously, this man's babysitting duties are done. I mean, that's but the idea somehow that you pay a stranger $20, you go drinking, and then you say, well, I trusted her. I think he should do some actual real time. Real time custody.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
at the bare minimum, like some serious treatment or something, because there's that's, if it's to the point where like you're willing to just like let your granddaughter of all things like go off with anybody.
I'm talking custody.
All right. I agree. I agree.
So interesting because Alison, you as a criminal defense attorney, wouldn't the defense be, well, okay, yes, this was a horrible thing that he did. He'll never have access to her again. And thank God she wasn't hurt.
Yeah, but there needs to be some punishment.
Oh, I totally agree with you.
Sometimes drunks need to be in a drunk tank for a minute.
Yep.
Well, and how do you think, too, that they'll, both prosecutors and, if this goes in front of a jury or anything, are going to see if he is maintaining this tune of kind of I didn't do anything wrong?
Wait a minute.
That's problematic.
I'm also bothered by the fact she's that he says it's God's will. No, actually, in this situation, it's the will of the criminal justice system and the judge. So if you tell a judge, well, I left it up to God's will, he's going to say, okay, well, God.
I'm taking over now.
Yeah.
I'm working with God now.
Yeah.
Wow.
We got a lot of comments on this one. The guy's mugshot, I'll just kind of describe it for our audio listeners, but he has very long gray hair, kind of big gray beard. Ryan asked if it was Rick Rubin, which he does kind of bear a striking resemblance to. It was kind of mixed on people's reactions to both the grandfather in this situation and the homeless woman. So kind of both caretakers of this child. Hefty called this guy a resourceful bloke. I don't know about that. Clint K said he went to jail for getting a babysitter, which obviously, a pretty different situation. I think most people vet their babysitters pretty well. I've never hired one, but I think you got to have some extensive references. Yeah. We got a lot of really good comments, though, about the woman involved in this story.
Yes.
Megan said she took the kid thrift shopping to get an ice cream. They had a good time. It's better than leaving the kid at home. I'm not saying it's a good situation at all, but it definitely could have been worse. And I have to agree with that. This woman, it seems like, I don't know that went out of her way, but she did the right thing. Yeah. And I don't know how else you could have responded to this other than maybe you call police immediately. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't owe any particular duty of care. They're not,
she could have just left it. She could have taken the $20 and just kind of split.
Right.
I think she should be commended. I think that's wonderful that she was concerned enough and spent the time. And yeah.
And then Betty Boop said that the homeless woman probably took better care of the child than the no good crap grandfather. Which, yeah, I mean, this is it's an unfortunate situation. It's like such a bizarre thing for this guy to do. But I think like I like the nugget of goodness that this woman did the right thing under no pressure to do so.
Yeah.
So that'll do it for this week's comment section. Thank you so much to everyone who left those. You can do that on our YouTube community page. We're also on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on X. Anywhere you interact with people socially, you can probably find us. But that'll do it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you all next week.
Bye, Will. Oh, Miss Alison, it is always so lovely to have you. I always wish that we could have more time just to chat about life and things, because you're so fascinating.
I know. And look, I love how in-depth and our discussions are. I mean, you always know sort of that bit of information that, because I love podcasts, I love crime shows myself, and I always love the additional information that you bring so that we sort of can be that 13th juror listening in on the case. So I love being on your show. I absolutely love you, Ana Garcia. I miss you.
I miss you.
Yeah. And thank you again for having me.
Oh, it's always such a pleasure. Miss Alison, where can people find you and follow you on social media?
Okay, so I'm a criminal defense attorney that runs my own practice out of Los Angeles. I am the legal expert at Access Hollywood. I have a segment called Trending with Triessl with Mario Lopez.
Love that.
Yeah, it's fun and fantastic. And I am fortunate enough to be the legal expert for KTLA based in Los Angeles, but part of the Nexstar family.
Excellent, excellent. Wow. Well, you can find me at Ana G News on all social media platforms, and I talk a little bit about crime, mostly about rescue dogs. I've got a dog arriving this afternoon. I'm very excited.
What kind of dog?
So, as many of you know, I am a volunteer for Purposeful Rescue, and she's about 10 years old, and she's definitely got a lot of breeds in her. And I don't know where they come up with the names here, but she's called Miss Toad the Wet Sprocket. And I was like, and we always come up, I mean, I don't know how this rescue comes up with these names, so I had to literally Google this. So it's a reference to a Monty Python skit, which then inspired a California indie rock band to take that name. How and why Miss Toad the Wet Sprocket?
I love it. Funny. Enjoy.
Yeah, she's going to be here for a little bit. Looking forward to helping her, and please rescue if you can. People who have rescued animals, they always say this. I saw it once on a coffee cup because I hadn't seen it before after I had adopted from a shelter. And it said, you didn't rescue them, they rescue you. And that is so true.
I mean, look, our house is like a zoo. The more animals, the merrier. I love it. And I think rescuing is so important. So great. Just to add to the list of things I love and admire about you.
Well, you'll be seeing me and Miss Toad getting to know each other for a little while.
Absolutely.
Oh, you can find this podcast and all episodes of our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, because there is where we have a vibrant community where we get to discuss these cases, what justice means, what you think, and that's important to all of us. This is a vocal community, and crime affects communities, and I think that's why we have a right to discuss them as a group, as a family.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And you can also subscribe to our newsletter at truecrimedaily.com. So until next week, I'm your host, Ana Garcia. And as we always say, don't do crime.